Welcome dear learners. My name is Suraj Mashik. Today we are going to go through with the session of still wine manufacturing. The video for manufacturing still wines will be in two parts. Let's begin with part 1. Before we move to the session, let's see the objectives of the session. The objectives of the session are: first, to introduce to the vinification process, to understand the difference between the vinification process of different types of wine. These are the objectives of the day. Let's see the first objective of the session. Vinification. Vinification, which is nothing but wine making. The process of conversion of grape juice into wine is known as vinification. This process starts with the selection of grapes, which is done through plucking, harvesting, and ends with the procedure called bottling. Winemaking can be divided into two general categories. One, still wine production, which is without the carbonation, whereas the second is sparkling wine production, which is with the carbonation. Carbonation is the CO2 gas which is inserted. Let's discuss the still wine manufacturing process, which is without the carbonation. The still wine manufacturing process is a step-by-step process in which it starts with the first, which is plucking and harvesting. Plucking and harvesting is nothing but cultivating the grapes from the vineyard. These grapes are then sent to the wineries for vinification process. The grapes can be picked either mechanically or by hand. The hand-picked method is costly as it is a little time-consuming and it selects best quality grapes. Often, this process of hand-picked grapes is used for costlier wine. The next is the mechanical method, which is more efficient, cost-effective, and well-suited for larger vineyards. The first image on the right you can see is the hand-picked grapes. The plucking is done by the hand, whereas the next is the equipment that is used for mechanical process of harvesting. After harvesting, the next part is crushing. These harvested grapes are then sent to the winery. The winery collects all the grapes and they wash it once. After the gentle washing, these grapes are crushed. Crushing is the process of gently squeezing the grapes, breaking their skin, and extracting the content of those berries. How it is done is basically these harvested grapes are washed and dumped into a large hopper called a crusher, which cracks the berries, allowing the juice, which consists of sugar, that is called as pre-run or must, to flow. Before crushing the berries, they are passed through a conveyor belt, where the destemming is also done. While destemming, the secondary part of this operation removes the stem from grapes by centrifugal force with the use of large auger. The stem exits from one side of the machine, whereas the berries are crushed and they are extracted at the bottom. The stems, which are good source of nitrogen, are loaded into trucks and dumped back in the vineyard, which helps as a natural fertilizer for the vineyard. There are two ways of crushing the grapes. One, which is the modern method, which consists of machines, equipment, which break the grape and crush it, and the juice is extracted. Whereas there is an old and traditional method of stamping. Stamping the grapes with their bare foot. This is one of the traditional ways of crushing the grapes. Most of the wineries do follow such process just for the guest entertainment and for a better guest experience. Crushing differs according to the wine. The crushing of white wine is mostly called as squeezing. It is gently pressing off that particular grape. all the free run is collected. There is no skin, no stem is collected. This helps to avoid any extraction of tannin. It also maintains proper juice flow through a matrix of the grape cluster rather than the crushing of red wine is mostly with the skin, where the skin of the grape is kept in contact with the must. Red wines are produced by destemming and crushing the grape into a tank and leaving the skin in contact with the juice throughout the fermentation, which is also called as maceration, extracting of the color from the skin. The contact between the juice and skin is essential for the same. Crushing for rosé wine. In case of rosé wine, the fruit is crushed and the darker skins are left in contact with the juice just long enough to extract the color that the winemaker desires. The must is then pressed and fermentation continues as if the winemaker was making a white wine. Once the free run, which is called as must, is procured, these must is sent to the next step of the vinification, which is fermentation. What is fermentation? Fermentation is a process in which the yeast reacts with the sugar, that is, the yeast heats all the sugar from the free run and converts that sugar into ethyl alcohol and CO2 gas. The CO2 gas is released in the air. Or if you're making a sparkling wine, this CO2 gas is maintained. And the ethyl alcohol is the one that is contributing for the wine. The ideal temperature for fermentation is approximately 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. To bring down the temperature, the vats are cooled by cold water running through the metal coils inside the vat. They are known as attemperators. The yeast that is used for making the fermentation process happen is called as Saccharomyces cerevisiae. This yeast is one of the top fermented yeasts used for fermentation. Red wine fermentation takes approximately around 5 to 7 days. White wine and rosé wine fermentation temperature are lesser than the red wine, as well as the fermentation time also reduces. These are the vats that are used for fermentation process. If the must does not contain enough natural sugar to produce required amount of alcohol, a small amount of sugar may be added, which is termed as chaptalization. Chaptalization is subject to local regulation. According to the norms of the government, this chaptalization takes place. Each gram of sugar in the must is converted to about half a gram of ethyl alcohol during fermentation, which means if there is 14% alcohol in a particular wine, the free run had 28% sugar in it, which is just the double of the ethyl alcohol generated. The sugar percentage in must is measured with the help of a saccharometer, which is used for measuring the sugar level in a particular free run. Similarly, acids can also be added to the must if the acidity is low, which is called as acidification. During the fermentation process, the wild yeast present on the screen of the grapes begins with the initial fermentation process, which later dies at 4% alcohol by volume, and hence there the winemaker's yeast is added, where the winemaker's yeast can reach up to 15% alcohol by volume. As the percentage of alcohol rises, the yeast is killed in that particular free run or the must. During this fermentation process of red wine, the skin in the vat floats to the surface of fermenting must. They harden, forming what is known as a cap or a hat. All the skin that is present in that particular free run is collected on the top. It accumulates at the top. This particular skin hardens and forms a cap. This cap is not desired. Hence, to break that particular cap, it is either done manually or mechanically. Most of the wineries, to avoid this cap, use a rotary fermenter which uses motor to turn the content. It swirls the complete content inside and hence breaking the complete cap. Once the fermentation process is towards the end of it, the pressing of that particular wine is done. Pressing is done for a certain purpose. Once the fermentation ends, the new wine lies at the bottom called as vin and the solid floats on the top. This new wine, which is called as vin is collected first. That new wine is racked in another vat, and the solid which is left is then pressed with the help of a press. This pressing extracts the further leftover wine. This wine is called as vin press, which is high in tannins, which is high in minerals and high in flavors. This vin press is then added to the vin equaling the flavors, equaling the tannins in the wine. Further procedure for wine manufacturing, that is vinification, will be discussed in next part. There we have a young wine ready for maturation. Thank you so much. References for data credit and for photo credit. Thank you.